Alright, we're continuing work on this Mac Pro. If you're unfamiliar with the project, I've already done 2 parts, and I'll link to them now. But if you're up to speed, let's get into it. I finished the last video by triumphantly showing the mask for the etch. But boy was I wrong. It turns out that my design doesn't really fit onto the knife without hitting the dimples. So I had to get back onto my computer and do what I tried to avoid in the first place. When I first got the profile for the blade, I simply traced the knife. And I thought that eyeballing where the dimples were would be good enough for the project. But now that I need a more accurate read on the topography, I'm just going to use a picture. Before I can do anything useful with it though, I need to correct any perspective warping. And there's no real trick to this, I'm just using transform tools within my program. And you can barely see them, but I've set up guidelines across my image, and I'm just referencing those as I manually shift the perspective from each corner. After that, I head into Inkscape, my vector program, and the first thing I need to do is scale the image properly. So there in red, I made a 1-inch square, and that's 1 inch within the program. And now I'm just going to use the grid from the photo and resize my image until it fits in there relatively well. And now that our photo's been corrected, we can see where I went wrong. When I overlay the existing artwork over top of the knife, we can see that I misjudged the trajectory of the dimples towards the tip of the knife. And this might have been a big deal, but I already planned to go through and do one more pass on the artwork to add some extra detail to the waves and just lock everything down. So I did all that off camera and we're ready to go with our new mask. I previously mentioned that I had to take the branding off of this side of the knife, and now it's time to do it. And I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do this at first. I was thinking I'd need some kind of chemical maybe. But I thought I'd go in and just try to gently use a sharp blade, and it actually worked really well. So I continued working my way across the surface. I tried to stay gentle with it. I don't really want to scratch up the surface, even though I'm about to burn holes in it. And yeah, you can still kind of see a faint outline of where the paint was. So to make everything clean and even, I'm using these non-scratch pads. I just cut off a little piece and a couple of swipes and it was looking good. On to the main event. With our mask in hand, the first step is to apply transfer tape to it. And this is just a sticky film that will cling to all of the details of my mask so that when I peel off the backing for the vinyl, everything stays in place and doesn't get disrupted. And with that out of the way, it's time to line everything up. You can see here when I let light shine through the vinyl, I can see the profile of the knife behind it. So I'll use that to my advantage as I try to get everything aligned. First, I'm going to remove the backing from the top of my mask, exposing the sticky backing of the vinyl. And then I'm going to carefully hold everything up to my window so that I can see through the mask to the profile of the knife. But I can also see the details of the mask if I get really close and look through the front of it. And this is a really tricky process, and I still screw it up more often than I'd care to admit. But the basic idea is to keep the mask taut and laying flat on the blade as you try to line everything up. And when it looks good, I will go in with my thumb and put the sticky exposed part. I'll seal that down and that'll lock my alignment in place. Now I still have to be very careful with it. It's barely hanging on there. But for now, I can move over to my desk and get in a more practical setup for doing this. And that's what I did, and everything was going well, until this happened. I jerked the knife while I was applying the mask, and part of it peeled off and stuck in the wrong place. And then when I tried to lay everything back over, it stuck to the back of the mask, and then it doesn't look that bad on camera, but it is pretty unrecoverable, which was really annoying. So I cleaned it off and redid it, and that's why this piece of transfer tape is different from the one that you saw in the previous parts. Moving on. As I pull off the backing from the mask, it's going to expose all these sticky edges, and I don't want them to get covered in dust or anything that's on my desk. So I'm using an old piece of backing that I have to sandwich the knife between the vinyl and this new backing. And then I'll flip it over and begin applying the mask. If you've watched people working with vinyl on YouTube in the past, you might have seen this as like a quick and simple process. And I don't doubt that it is for them, but with the size of my details and all of these intricacies, I think it's a completely different ballgame. I basically never get like easy transfers. So the way I go about it is to slowly peel my backing away and make sure that the transfer tape is doing its job and picking up all of the pieces. And if it doesn't, I can catch that and lay everything flat and press the transfer tape into those details and try again. And keep in mind that while I'm doing this, I still have no idea if I got the alignment correct in the first phase. I just have to do this and trust the process and just find out what happens. And this time it looked good, so I get to move on. I'm just going to replace my temporary backing paper with the proper vinyl that will eventually go into the acid. So I just line it up and get this side done way faster than the other side. And once I've sealed it up, I've got this nice pouch that's going to resist acid everywhere except where I want it to get to. And right at the tip and at the heel, the knife cut through, but that's kind of normal. I'll fix that in a bit. For now, I'm going to get this transfer tape off and start weeding. And that's always satisfying to do. Off camera, I used nail polish to patch the holes at the heel and at the tip, and after one last inspection, we're ready for the etch. I'm not going to get into the chemistry before I've had a chance to create a video that talks about safely handling hazardous materials. But what I will say is that this is a mixture of hydrochloric acid and hydrogen peroxide. And on their own, you can buy these things off of the shelf, but after I mix them and use them, the resulting waste is a commercial waste. It's no longer household waste. And when I mix them together, there's a chemical reaction that produces chlorine gas as well. So this isn't stuff to just mess around with casually. I needed a well-ventilated area, so I went into the outside. And with my acid mix ready to go, I just dipped the blade. The amount of time it needs to spend in the acid bath really depends on the composition of the steel, the temperature of the acid mix, and how much oxygen is dissolved into it. And while I'm learning a lot about that process, the best way to know when it's done is to keep checking it and pulling it out when it looks ready. And once I've hit that point, I'll pull the knife out, neutralize it in baking soda and water, and then move on to cleaning it up. I wanted to try cleaning the loose oxidation off of the knife before I took the mask off this time, but it turned out to just not be worth the trouble. Usually I'll start stripping the mask right out of the baking soda and water mixture, and all of that extra liquid helps to release the mask. Still, it was worth doing the experiment. Now I know that I don't want to do this ever again. And there's our first rough glimpse of it. Definitely needs some cleanup work. And we're going to start rough and dirty with a buffing wheel. This is just a nice quick method to get into all the nooks and crannies and get rid of anything that's stuck to the steel. And even after just that, it's looking a lot better. But we're not out of the woods yet. We still have to go over all of these surfaces and make sure that they look their best. And that just about wraps things up. The last thing to do is sharpen the knife, but I'm not going to bore you with that. review I mentioned that the bolsters are welded onto these knives, and now that I've done the etch we can see a little bit of the evidence from that. This line looks like it's right at the edge of the weld, and you can see how a bit of heat can really change the structure of the steel. And that just about wraps it up for this one. It wasn't public knowledge when I posted my other videos, but now the cat's out of the bag. This knife is for Eugene Wong, and if you don't know him, he's a chef in Toronto. He's got awesome pages on Instagram and TikTok where he teaches people about cooking, but he also does a lot of great knife-specific videos where he helps you to learn new knife skills. I had seen him around on TikTok and I was following him, but then he actually ended up finding me when my wife made a video about my work on her TikTok page. Anyways, we got to chatting and he's just a really cool dude and I was really happy to be able to make this one for him. So yes, thank you Eugene for providing this awesome opportunity to work on this knife. And you should go check out his work, I'll leave links in the description. And if you liked watching this, consider subscribing here too. I'm gonna keep making videos like this, and there's a lot of experimentation that I want to do as well. So yeah, it'll be fun to catch all that on video. Anyways, have a good one.